The Gift. Part 1. December 23rd. Keith Hollister sat in his office at Evergreen Falls Memorial Hospital, staring at the spreadsheet on his screen. Row after row of data, names reduced to blood types, tissue matches, wait times calculated in days, numbers that used to mean something before they became just numbers. The coffee in his mug had gone cold 2 hours earlier. Outside his window, heavy snowflakes drifted past the glass, settling on the pines that gave the town its name. Christmas lights blinked from the houses visible on the hillside, red and green and gold against the white. Some neighbor had an inflatable Santa that bobbed in the wind, its fabric skin rippling. His phone buzzed. Another text from his sister Nova, asking if he'd come to Christmas Eve dinner tomorrow. He swiped it away. She'd sent 6 messages this week. He'd answered none of them. The door opened without a knock. Keith looked up to find Dr. Oliver Chen, head of the transplant unit, leaning against the frame. Oliver had been Keith's mentor once, back when Keith still thought this job could change the world. "You're still here," Oliver observed. "I work here," Keith replied. "It's 8 p.m. on the night before Christmas Eve," Oliver noted. Keith returned to his screen. "Organs don't care about holidays." Oliver walked in, uninvited, and sat in the chair across from Keith's desk. He wore a sweater his husband had probably forced him into, red with a reindeer that had a battery-powered nose. The nose wasn't lit. "I remember when you first started. You cried the day we placed a heart in that teenager. What was her name?" "I don't remember," Keith answered. "You do," Oliver countered, leaning forward. "What happened to you?" "I grew up." "Started seeing the math," Keith responded, gesturing at his screen. "For every person who gets an organ, 30 others die waiting. We're not saving lives. We're just choosing who gets to keep theirs a little longer." "That's a bleak way to look at it," Oliver remarked. "It's a realistic way to look at it," Keith stated. Oliver stood, shaking his head. "You used to understand that every transplant is a miracle. Someone choosing, in their worst moment, to give life to a stranger. You used to honor that." "I process paperwork, Oliver. I match tissue types and manage wait lists. There's nothing miraculous about Excel," Keith replied. "Go home, Keith. Spend Christmas with your sister," Oliver urged. "I'm fine here," Keith insisted. After Oliver left, Keith returned to his spreadsheet, but the numbers blurred together. He rubbed his eyes, then grabbed his coat. Maybe he should go home. His apartment would be dark and cold, but at least it would be quiet. The hospital corridor echoed with his footsteps. Most of the administrative offices had closed hours earlier. The clinical side never slept, but here in the business wing, Keith walked alone past darkened doorways and empty desks. He was nearly to the elevator when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Music, something old and haunting. A melody he recognized but couldn't place. It came from the conference room at the end of the hall. The door stood open. Inside, someone had lit candles. They flickered on the long table, dozens of them, their flames reflected in the window that looked out over the parking lot. The snow fell heavier now, building up on car windshields. A woman stood at the window. She wore a green dress that looked expensive, velvet maybe, and her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders. She turned when Keith entered, and he stopped. He knew her. He'd seen her face in a file, on a form, in a photograph attached to a donor registry. Emma Reeves, dead for 3 months. He'd processed her paperwork himself. "You're not real," Keith declared. Emma smiled. The expression was sad, knowing but real. "I'm as real as you need me to be." "I don't need you at all. I need sleep," Keith retorted. "You need to remember," Emma responded. She moved away from the window, her steps silent on the carpet. The candles guttered as she passed. "Do you remember me, Keith?" "I remember your file. Type O positive, multi-organ donor. Car accident on Route 9, Keith recited. The details came back clinical, detached. Harvested heart, liver, both kidneys, both lungs, pancreas, small intestine, 8 recipients. Is that all I was? A list of parts? Emma asked. Keith's throat felt tight. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've lost, Emma explained. She gestured toward the window. Outside, headlights cut through the snow as a car pulled into the parking lot. 3 people are coming to see you. Listen to them. See what you refuse to see anymore. This is insane, Keith muttered. This is necessary, Emma corrected. Her image began to fade, growing translucent in the candlelight. You have one chance to find your way back, Keith. One chance to remember why this matters. Don't waste it. She vanished. The candles went out all at once, plunging the room into darkness. Keith stood frozen, his heart beating too fast in his chest. He could smell the smoke from the extinguished wicks, acrid and real. The elevator chimed in the hallway. Keith walked out of the conference room on legs that felt weak. The elevator doors opened, and a young woman stepped out. She looked to be in her mid-20s with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail and freckles across her nose. She wore jeans and a parka with snow melting on the shoulders. She saw Keith and stopped. Are you Keith Hollister? How did you get up here? This floor is restricted after hours, Keith questioned. The guard let me in. He said you were still here, the woman explained. She walked toward him, and Keith noticed she moved with an athlete's grace, her steps confident and strong. I'm Skylar Martinez. I need to talk to you. Make an appointment. I'm leaving, Keith responded. Please, Skylar pleaded. She caught his arm as he tried to pass. Her grip was firm, her hand warm through his sleeve. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. You never return calls. Keith pulled free. If this is about donor family notification, there's a policy. We don't facilitate contact between recipients and donor families unless both parties specifically request it through the proper channels. It's not about that. Well, it is, but not the way you think, Skylar clarified. She reached into her parka and pulled out a small photo album. The cover was decorated with pressed flowers, delicate and preserved under clear plastic. 3 months ago, I received a heart transplant. The donor was a woman named Emma Reeves. Keith felt cold. I can't confirm or deny any donor information. You don't have to. Her family wanted me to know who saved my life. They reached out through the registry, Skylar revealed. She opened the album. The first page showed a woman laughing, arms spread wide on a beach. Emma. Younger than the DMV photo in her file, more alive. She was 28. She taught second grade. She collected sea glass. She wanted to visit all 50 states before she turned 30. Why are you telling me this? Keith asked. Because you were the one who coordinated my transplant. Your name is on all the paperwork, and I wanted you to understand what her death gave me, Skylar explained. She turned the page. This photo showed a hospital room. Skylar herself looking gaunt and grey in a bed, oxygen tubes in her nose. That was me 2 days before the transplant. I had dilated cardiomyopathy. My heart was failing, and I'd been on the wait list for 9 months. The doctors said I had maybe 2 weeks left. Keith had seen 1,000 photos like this. They used to affect him. Now he just wanted to leave. I'm glad the transplant was successful. Is that all you have to say? Skylar challenged. What else do you want? Keith countered. Skylar stared at him. Her eyes were brown, warm, and deeply disappointed. I want you to care. I want you to understand that this job you do isn't just paperwork. It's life and death and miracles. There are no miracles, just timing and tissue matches and luck, Keith stated. You really believe that? Skylar questioned. I believe in what I can quantify, Keith replied. Skylar turned more pages in the album. She stopped on one that showed her running, bib number pinned to her shirt, arms pumped in exertion. The photo had been taken at a finish line. This was 3 weeks ago, the Evergreen Falls Christmas 5K. I ran the whole thing, no stopping, no walking. My heart rate stayed steady the whole time. Emma's heart, it beat in her chest for 28 years. and now it beats in mine. She placed her hand over her sternum. Keith could see her pulse in her throat, steady and strong. Before the transplant, I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, Skylar continued. I was drowning in my own body. Every breath was a fight. I'd already planned my funeral. I'd written letters to my family to be opened after I died. She closed the album. Emma saved my life, and you facilitated that. You did the work that made it possible. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means I did my job, Keith answered. It should mean more than that, Skylar pressed. Keith looked away. Through the window at the end of the hall, he could see the snow coming down harder now. The parking lot lights glowed through the flakes, turning the world soft and white. I've coordinated over 300 transplants. If I stopped to think about every single one, I'd never sleep. So instead you don't think about any of them? Skylar asked. Instead I focus on the work, Keith replied. Skylar put the album away. When she looked at Keith again, her expression held pity. That was worse than anger. After the transplant, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering about Emma. Who was she? What did she like? What were her dreams? The grief counselor said it was normal that recipients often feel this connection to their donors. It's called transplant survivor's guilt. It's well documented, Keith stated. It's not guilt. It's gratitude. It's awe, Skylar corrected, stepping closer. Do you know what it's like to feel someone else's heart beating in your chest? To know that their final act on earth was choosing to give you life? I know the medical process, yes, Keith responded. I'm not talking about medicine. I'm talking about humanity, Skylar emphasized. Keith's phone buzzed again. Another text from Nova, this one just a string of Christmas tree emojis. He silenced it. I need to go. Come with me first, Skylar requested. Where? Keith asked. I want to show you something. It won't take long, Skylar answered. It's late. I'm tired, Keith protested. Please, Skylar urged. She held out her hand. Give me 20 minutes. If you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you. Keith didn't know why he said yes. Maybe because Emma's ghost, hallucination, whatever it had been, still lingered in his mind. Maybe because he was too tired to argue. Or maybe because something in Skylar's face reminded him of the person he used to be, back when he thought this work mattered. They took the elevator down to the ground floor and walked out into the snow. The cold bit at Keith's face, sharp and clean. He'd left his gloves in his office and his hands ached within seconds. Skylar led him across the parking lot to a blue Honda with snow piling on the roof. I'm not getting in a car with a stranger, Keith declared. We're not strangers. You saved my life, Skylar countered. She unlocked the doors. Besides, we're just going 2 blocks. You can walk back if you want. Against his better judgment, Keith got in. Skylar drove slowly through the snow, windshield wipers beating a rhythm. The streets of Evergreen Falls looked like a postcard, shops with lit windows and garland wrapped around lampposts. Someone had placed an enormous wreath on the door of the library. The diner on Main Street had spelled out J-O-Y in white lights. They turned onto Oak Avenue and pulled up in front of a small house with blue siding. Every window glowed. People moved inside, shadows against drawn curtains. This is Emma's parents' house, Skylar explained. They're having a memorial tonight. They invited me. I shouldn't be here, Keith objected. Yes, you should, Skylar insisted. She got out of the car. Keith followed because he didn't know what else to do. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway, smiling. She had Emma's eyes, the same warm brown. Skylar, I'm so glad you came. And you brought someone. This is Keith Hollister, Skylar introduced. He coordinated Emma's organ donations. The woman's smile grew. Oh, Mr. Hollister. Come in, please. I'm Jaden Reeves, Emma's mother. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon. A Christmas tree stood in the living room, decorated with handmade ornaments and strings of popcorn. Photos covered every surface. Emma at every age. Emma as a toddler, with chocolate on her face. Emma in a graduation gown. Emma holding a golden retriever puppy. About 20 people filled the space, talking in small groups, holding mugs of cider. They looked up as Keith entered, curious and welcoming. "Everyone," Jaden announced, raising her voice slightly. "This is Keith Hollister. He's the coordinator who made Emma's donations possible." The room erupted in thanks. People came forward, shaking Keith's hand, hugging him, telling him how grateful they were. Keith stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. A man with silver hair and Emma's smile gripped Keith's shoulder. "Thank you," he declared. His voice cracked. "Thank you for giving my daughter's death meaning." "I just did the paperwork," Keith muttered. "You did so much more than that," Jaden corrected, taking Keith's hand. "You made sure Emma's wish was honored." She'd always been a donor. Ever since she got her license at 16, she'd checked that box. She used to say that if something happened to her, she wanted to help people. And you made that possible. Keith didn't know what to say. He'd met donor families before, years earlier when he'd first started, but he'd stopped accepting those invitations, stopped allowing himself to see the grief and the gratitude. It was easier that way, cleaner. Skylar touched his arm. "Come meet the others." She led him through the house, introducing him to people Keith should have known. A teenage boy named Maverick, who'd received Emma's left kidney. A woman in her 40s named Quinn, who'd gotten her liver. An older man named Ezra, who'd received her right lung. They each told their stories. Maverick had been on dialysis for 2 years, his kidneys destroyed by a genetic disorder. Now he was healthy enough to try out for his high school basketball team. Quinn had been dying of cirrhosis, her liver scarred beyond repair. Now she was planning to go back to college to finish her degree. Ezra had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and had been on oxygen 24 hours a day. Now he could breathe on his own again. 8 people, all in this house, all alive because of Emma. "We do this every year," Jaden explained, pressing a mug of cider into Keith's cold hands. "On the anniversary of Emma's death, we gather together. All the people she saved, all the lives she touched. It's not about mourning, it's about celebrating. It's about remembering that even in our darkest moment, we could give light to others." Keith looked around the room. These weren't just statistics. They weren't just successful outcomes. They were people. Living, breathing, laughing people who wouldn't exist without Emma's choice. And without his work. The thought hit him hard. He'd been so focused on the ones he couldn't save, the ones who died on the wait list, that he'd stopped seeing the ones who lived. "Are you okay?" Skylar asked. She stood close, her voice low. "I don't know," Keith admitted. "Come here," Skylar urged. She led him to a quieter corner, away from the crowd. Through the window, Keith could see the snow still falling, piling up on cars and fences. "I know this is overwhelming." "You ambushed me," Keith accused. "I needed you to see." "Oliver told me you've been shutting down. Shutting people out. He's worried about you," Skylar revealed. "Oliver should mind his own business," Keith grumbled. "Your well-being is his business. He cares about you," Skylar countered. She took a breath, and Keith watched her chest rise and fall, Emma's heart pumping blood through her veins. "We all care about you. Everyone in this room owes their life to the work you do, but you can't do that work if you've lost sight of why it matters." "And you think bringing me here would fix that?" Keith challenged. "I think seeing the reality might help you remember," Skylar responded. Keith looked back at the party. Maverick was showing someone a video on his phone, probably basketball drills. Quinn was laughing at something Ezra said, her whole face bright with joy. Jaden stood by the Christmas tree, adjusting an ornament, and Keith could see she was crying and smiling at the same time. "Emma made a choice, Zeus," Skylar continued. "In her worst moment, she chose to help others. You honor that choice every day. Every transplant you coordinate, every match you make, every family you help navigate the worst time of their lives. That's not just paperwork, Keith. That's sacred work. It doesn't feel sacred. It feels impossible, Keith confessed. Because you're trying to carry it all alone, Skylar pointed out. She placed her hand over her heart again. That gesture Keith was beginning to recognize. You don't have to. Emma lives on in 8 people. 8 people who will touch countless other lives. The ripple effect of her choice is infinite. And you're part of that. You're the one who makes it possible. Keith's throat ached. His eyes burned. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Maybe not since that first year, when a patient he'd been working with for months finally got her transplant and wrote him a thank you card in shaky handwriting. He'd thrown that card away, filed it in a drawer and tried to forget it because remembering hurt too much. I should go, Keith announced. Skylar looked sad but didn't argue. Okay. Thank you for coming. She walked him to the door. Keith said his goodbyes to people who thanked him again, who hugged him and told him he was a blessing. The words felt like weights. Outside, the cold air helped. Keith breathed it in, feeling it burn his lungs. The snow crunched under his boots as he walked back toward the hospital. He'd left his car in the parking lot. The walk would take 10 minutes, maybe 15 in the snow. He made it 1 block before he heard footsteps behind him. Keith, wait, Skylar called. He turned to find Skylar jogging toward him, her breath fogging in the cold. I'll drive you back. I can walk, Keith protested. It's snowing hard. Come on, Skylar insisted. They got back in her car. She cranked the heat, and warm air blasted from the vents. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Thank you, Keith finally offered, for showing me that. Did it help? Skylar asked. I don't know. Maybe, Keith answered. He looked at her profile as she drove, her face lit by the dashboard glow. How do you do it? How do you carry someone else's heart and not feel crushed by the weight of it? I carry it with gratitude. Every morning when I wake up, I think about Emma. I think about what she gave me. And I try to live in a way that honors that gift, Skylar explained. She pulled into the hospital parking lot, stopping next to Keith's car. I'm not saying it's easy. Some days it's really hard, but it's also beautiful. I get to live a life Emma can't. I get to experience things she'll never experience, and that means something. Keith nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. Can I ask you something? Skylar ventured. Sure, Keith replied. Why did you become a transplant coordinator? Skylar questioned. The question caught Keith off guard. He'd stopped asking himself that many years before. My brother died when I was 17. Leukemia. He needed a bone marrow transplant, and we couldn't find a match in time. I watched him fade away, and I felt so helpless. I couldn't do anything to save him. Keith stared at his hands. When I was in college, I learned about organ donation and transplant coordination. I thought maybe I could help other families avoid what we went through, make sure people got the organs they needed. What was your brother's name? Skylar asked gently. Luna. We called him Lou, Keith answered. Emma would have liked him, I think. She was like that. She saw people's light, Skylar observed. Keith looked at Skylar. You talk about her like you knew her. In a way, I do. I carry her heart. That creates a bond, Skylar explained. She smiled. Her mom gave me her journals. Emma was a writer. She kept notebooks full of thoughts and observations. Reading them, I feel like I understand her, like she's still here in some way. That's a comforting thought, Keith acknowledged. It is, Skylar agreed. Keith got out of the car, then paused with the door open. Skylar, thank you, really. You're welcome. Merry Christmas, Keith, Skylar replied. Merry Christmas, Keith echoed. He watched her drive away, tail lights disappearing into the snow. Then he got in his own car, but he didn't start the engine. He just sat there, thinking about Emma and Luna and all the people whose lives intersected with death and came out the other side changed. His phone buzzed. Another text from Nova. Please come tomorrow. It's not Christmas without you. Keith typed back, "I'll be there." Then he drove home through the snow. His mind full of ghosts and gratitude, and the weight of work he'd forgotten was holy. Part 2, December 24th. Keith woke to sunlight reflecting off snow, the brightness painful after the dim grey of recent weeks. He'd slept poorly, dreams full of Emma's face and the sound of Skylar's voice explaining what it felt like to carry someone else's heart. He made coffee and stood at his apartment window, looking out at Evergreen Falls. The town sparkled under fresh snow. People walked dogs along the sidewalk. Kids built a snowman in the park across the street. It was Christmas Eve and the world seemed determined to be cheerful about it. His phone rang. Oliver's name on the screen. "Hey," Keith answered. "How are you?" Oliver asked, his tone careful. "Skylar Martinez ambushed me last night," Keith reported. "I know. I may have given her your schedule," Oliver admitted. "That's a violation of about 12 different privacy policies," Keith pointed out. "Sue me! Did it help?" Oliver challenged. Keith took a sip of coffee, buying time. "She took me to a memorial for Emma Reeves, the donor whose organs I coordinated. All 8 recipients were there." Oliver was quiet for a moment. And I don't know. It was overwhelming," Keith confessed. "Good. You need to be overwhelmed. You need to remember why this work matters," Oliver stated. "You say that like it's easy," Keith remarked. "It's not easy. But it's necessary," Oliver countered. He sighed. "Look, I'm not trying to fix you. I just want you to find your way back to yourself. The Keith I hired 5 years ago believed in miracles. He saw the beauty in this work. What happened to him?" "He got tired." "He got realistic," Keith answered. "He got scared," Oliver corrected, his voice gentle. "You're scared of caring because caring means it hurts when things go wrong. And things go wrong a lot in this job. People die on the wait list. Families grieve. We can't save everyone. But that doesn't mean we stop trying, and it doesn't mean we stop seeing the humanity in what we do." Keith closed his eyes. "I'm going to my sister's for Christmas dinner." "That's a start. Baby steps," Oliver encouraged. After they hung up, Keith showered and dressed. He had the day off, but he found himself thinking about work anyway. About the patients on the wait list, their lives hanging in the balance, about the families hoping for a miracle, and the donors who made those miracles possible. He thought about Emma, choosing in her last moments to give life to strangers. At noon, his doorbell rang. Keith wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door to find a man in his 30s standing in the hallway, holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. The man had dark skin, close-cropped hair, and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Keith Hollister?" the man asked. "Yes," Keith confirmed. "I'm Noah Chen, Oliver's husband. He said you might need some Christmas cheer, so I made you lasagna," Noah explained. He held out the dish. "It's still warm." Keith took the casserole, bewildered. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but Oliver's been worried, and I worry when he worries. Also, I made too much. We're having 20 people for dinner tonight, but I apparently forgot how to count portions," Noah revealed with a smile. "Can I come in? Or is this weird? This might be weird." "It's a little weird," Keith admitted, but he stepped aside. "Come in." Noah walked into Keith's apartment, looking around at the sparse furniture and bare walls. Keith had lived here for 3 years and still hadn't bothered to decorate. The place looked like a hotel room, temporary and cold. "Oliver said you've been struggling," Noah observed, direct in the way that made Keith understand why Oliver loved him. "Oliver talks about me too much," Keith grumbled. "He cares about you. He sees you going down a dark path and he wants to help," Noah explained. He sat on the couch, uninvited but comfortable. "I'm a therapist, so I'm contractually obligated to tell you that isolation and emotional detachment are classic signs of burnout and compassion fatigue." "I'm fine," Keith insisted. "You're living in an empty apartment on Christmas Eve with no decorations and apparently no joy. That's not fine," Noah countered. Keith sat in the chair across from Noah. "Did Oliver send you here to psychoanalyze me?" He sent me here to feed you and maybe remind you that you're not alone, Noah clarified. He leaned forward. I know what it's like to work in healthcare. I did crisis counseling for 3 years before I burned out. Every day, I met people at their absolute worst moments. Suicide attempts, trauma, grief. I tried to help, but I couldn't help everyone. Some people I couldn't reach. Some people didn't want help. And eventually, I started shutting down because feeling their pain was too much. What changed? Keith asked. I almost quit. I was ready to leave the field entirely. But then I met someone who reminded me why I started, a patient who had experienced a psychiatric emergency and later came back to thank me for sitting with her in the ER. She said I'd made her feel seen when she felt invisible. That moment reminded me that even small acts of compassion matter. Even when we can't save everyone, we can show up for the ones in front of us, Noah recounted. Keith absorbed this. And you think I need to show up more? I think you need to let yourself feel again. Even if it hurts, Noah replied. They talked for another hour. Noah told stories about Oliver, about their life together, about the children they were hoping to adopt. He made Keith laugh, which felt foreign and good. When Noah finally left, Keith felt less alone. He ate the lasagna for lunch. It was delicious, rich with cheese and herbs. He'd forgotten what it felt like to eat food someone made with care. At 3 p.m., there was another knock at his door. Keith opened it to find a teenager standing in the hallway. The kid looked about 17, lanky and tall with dark hair falling in his eyes. He wore a backpack and a nervous expression. Are you Keith Hollister? The teenager asked. I am, Keith confirmed. I'm Kim Reeves. Emma was my sister, the teenager revealed. Keith's heart stuttered. Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thanks, Kim responded. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. I was at the memorial last night, but I didn't get to talk to you. I wanted to come by and show you something if you have time. Of course. Come in, Keith invited. Kim entered the apartment, looking around with the same barely concealed judgment Noah had shown. Keith made a mental note to buy some furniture, maybe a plant. Do you want something to drink? Keith offered. I'm good, Kim declined. He swung his backpack off and unzipped it, pulling out a laptop. I made something. A project for my digital media class. It's about Emma and organ donation. I wanted you to see it. They sat at Keith's small kitchen table. Kim opened the laptop and pulled up a video file. It's rough. I'm still learning editing, but I think it turned out okay. He hit play. The video opened with a photo of Emma, the same beach picture from Skylar's album. She looked radiant, alive, laughing at the camera with joy that seemed to pour off the screen. Then the photo faded and text appeared. Emma Reeves, 1997 to 2025. Teacher, sister, donor. Kim's voice narrated over photos and video clips. He talked about growing up with Emma, about her love of teaching and her belief that everyone deserved kindness. He showed report cards where Emma had written encouraging notes to students. He showed photos of her classroom, walls covered with artwork and affirmations. Then the tone shifted. Kim talked about the car accident, about the phone call in the middle of the night, about sitting in the hospital and being told Emma wouldn't survive. His voice cracked, but he kept going. My parents asked if we should donate her organs, Kim narrated in the video. I didn't know what to say. Emma was my sister. The idea of her body being cut up and given away felt wrong. But then, my mom reminded me that Emma had always wanted to be a donor. She'd told us so many times, if something happened, she wanted to help people. So we said yes. The video showed clips from the memorial. Skylar talking about her transplant, her hand over her heart. Maverick shooting baskets, his movements fluid and strong. Quinn laughing with her grandchildren. Ezra taking a deep breath. No oxygen tank in sight. 8 people, Kim continued in the video. Emma saved 8 people, and those 8 people will touch thousands more. Teachers who will teach students, parents who will raise children, People who will love and create and make the world better, all because my sister chose to be a donor. The video ended with another photo of Emma. She was younger in this one, maybe 10 years old, holding Kim as a baby. They were both laughing, and the love between them was obvious. The final text appeared. One choice. Infinite impact. Register as an organ donor today. Keith realized his eyes were wet. He wiped at them, embarrassed. But Kim was crying too. I wanted people to understand, Kim explained. Emma's death wasn't meaningless. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was also a gift. And I wanted to show that. It's beautiful, Keith replied. His voice came out rough. Really beautiful. My teacher wants me to submit it to a film festival. She thinks it could win something, Kim revealed. He closed the laptop. But I wanted you to see it first. My mom said you coordinated everything. She said you worked really hard to make sure Emma's wishes were honored. I just followed protocol, Keith deflected. It was more than that. She said you were kind. She said you made a terrible situation a little bit easier, Kim insisted. He looked at Keith with eyes that held too much grief for someone so young. Thank you for that. You don't need to thank me, Keith protested. Yeah, I do. Because of you, my sister's death meant something. Because of you, 8 people are alive. That matters, Kim emphasized. They talked for a while longer. Kim told stories about Emma, about the way she used to make pancakes shaped like animals every Sunday morning, about how she'd taught him to ride a bike and stood by his side when he came out as gay and drove him to his first date. She'd been more than a sister. She'd been a protector, a friend, a guide. I miss her every day, Kim confessed. But knowing that pieces of her are still out there, still helping people, that makes it easier. Like she's not really gone, just transformed. After Kim left, Keith sat in his apartment as the sun set outside his window. The sky turned pink and orange, colors reflecting off the snow. He thought about Emma and Luna and all the people he'd helped over the years. He thought about the ones who'd lived and the ones who died and the families caught in between. He'd been so focused on the failures that he'd stopped seeing the successes. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Skylar. Oliver gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Keith typed back. Better. Thanks for last night. It helped. Good. Merry Christmas Eve? Merry Christmas Eve. Keith stood and looked around his apartment. It was still bare, still cold, but it felt less empty somehow. He had a casserole from Noah in the fridge. He had Kim's video in his mind. He had Skylar's voice on the phone, checking in. He had people who cared. At 6 p.m. he drove to Nova's house. She lived in the suburbs, in a neighborhood where every house competed for the best Christmas display. Lights everywhere, inflatable characters on lawns, projection screens showing snow falling on garage doors. Nova opened the door before he could knock. She was 3 years younger than Keith, with his same dark hair but warmer eyes. She wore an apron that said, "Kiss the cook," and had flour on her cheek. "You came," Nova breathed, and the relief in her voice made Keith's chest ache. "I said I would," Keith reminded her. She pulled him into a hug. Keith stiffened at first, then relaxed into it. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him. "I'm so glad you're here," Nova declared. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." The house smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread. Nova's husband, Bo, was in the kitchen, basting the bird. Their 2 kids, ages 5 and 7, were in the living room building a Lego set. Christmas music played from a speaker somewhere, familiar songs that made Keith think of a childhood. "Uncle Keith!" the kids shouted. They abandoned their Legos and ran over, talking over each other about school and Santa and the presents they hoped to get. Keith knelt and listened, asking questions, trying to remember how to talk to children. They ate dinner at a table that barely fit everyone. Bo told jokes. Nova caught Keith up on family news. The kids spilled milk and giggled about it. It was chaotic and loud and wonderful. After dinner, they moved to the living room. The kids opened their Christmas Eve pajamas, a tradition Keith had forgotten about. Nova handed him a present. "You didn't have to," Keith protested. "Just open it," Nova urged. Inside was a framed photo, Keith and Luna as kids, building a snowman. Someone had taken the picture years earlier, before Luna got sick. They looked happy, both of them laughing at something beyond the frame. "I found it when I was going through Mom's things," Nova explained. "I thought you should have it." Keith stared at the photo. Luna's face, so young and alive, smiled back at him. "Thank you." "I know you've been struggling," Nova ventured quietly. The kids were distracted with their new pajamas, and Bo was cleaning up wrapping paper. "I don't know why, and you don't have to tell me. But I want you to know I'm here. I miss Lou too, every day. But I don't want to lose you by inches because you're too afraid to let people in." "I'm not afraid," Keith insisted. "You are. You've been afraid since he died," Nova countered. She took his hand. "But fear is not living. It's just surviving. And Lou would hate that you're just surviving." Keith looked at the photo again. Luna's face, full of joy. "He would, wouldn't he?" "He'd kick your butt. He'd tell you to stop being an idiot and go live your life," Nova declared with a smile. "So consider this me channeling his spirit. Stop being an idiot. Go live your life." Keith laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in his chest. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise." "You just stopped listening," Nova teased. They stayed until the kids fell asleep on the couch, full of cookies and excitement. Keith helped Bo carry them to bed, tucking blankets around small bodies. He felt something shift inside him, a door opening that he'd kept locked for years. On the drive home, Keith thought about Emma's choice. One person deciding, in their final moments, to help others. One choice that rippled out and touched 8 lives, 16 lives, hundreds of lives. One choice that mattered. He pulled into his apartment parking lot and sat in his car, engine idling. Then, on impulse, he pulled out his phone and texted Skylar. "Are you busy tomorrow? Christmas Day?" She responded within seconds. "Spending the morning with my family, but I'm free in the afternoon." "Why? Want to get coffee?" "I'd like to talk more, if that's okay." "I'd love that." "Text me a time and place." Keith smiled at his phone. Then he went inside, hung Luna's photo on the wall, and went to bed feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Part 3. Christmas Day. Keith woke to his phone ringing. He grabbed it, seeing Oliver's name on the screen, and his stomach dropped. Oliver never called this early unless something was wrong. "What happened?" Keith answered. "We have a donor. MVA victim, 26-year-old male. Brain death confirmed. Family is considering donation, but they're hesitant." "I need you to come in and talk to them," Oliver explained. "It's Christmas morning," Keith objected. "I know. I'm sorry. But they asked specifically for a coordinator, and you're the best at this." "Or you used to be," Oliver acknowledged. He paused. "Please, Keith. This kid is a perfect match for 3 people on our wait list. We can't lose this." Keith was already getting out of bed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The roads were empty, everyone home with family. The hospital looked quiet from the outside, but Keith knew inside it was a different story. Hospitals never slept, never took holidays. Death and illness didn't pause for Christmas. He found Oliver in the family consultation room with a couple in their 50s. The woman had clearly been crying, her eyes swollen and red. The man held her hand, his face grey with shock. "Mr. and Mrs. Torres," Oliver began. "This is Keith Hollister, our transplant coordinator. He's going to talk with you about the donation process." Keith sat down across from them. He'd done this hundreds of times, but today it felt different. Today, he saw them not as another case, but as people in the worst moment of their lives. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Keith offered. Mrs. Torres nodded. She couldn't seem to speak. "Our son, Mateo," Mr. Torres revealed. "He was driving home from his girlfriend's house. A drunk driver ran a red light. Mateo didn't have a chance." The name hit Keith with unexpected force. Not Quinn this time, but it carried the same weight of a life cut short. "The doctors said he's brain dead," Mr. Torres continued. "They said he's gone. But he's still breathing. His heart is still beating. I don't understand how he can be gone if his heart is still beating." Keith had heard this so many times. The confusion that came with brain death, the inability to reconcile what they saw with what they were told. "I know this is incredibly difficult to understand. Brain death means that every part of his brain has permanently stopped functioning. He can't think, can't feel, can't breathe on his own. The machines are breathing for him, making his heart beat. But Mateo himself is gone." Mrs. Torres finally spoke, her voice a whisper. "He always said he wanted to be a donor. Since he was a teenager, he said if anything happened to him, he wanted to help people." "That's a beautiful wish," Keith acknowledged. "But I don't know if I can do it," Mrs. Torres confessed. She looked up at Keith, her eyes desperate. "I don't know if I can say goodbye. If I can let them take him and cut him up and give away pieces of my baby." "You're not giving him away," Keith clarified gently. "You're honoring his wish. You're allowing his death to have meaning. 3 people are waiting for organs right now. People who will die without them. Mateo can save their lives." "Will it hurt him?" Mrs. Torres asked. "No. He's gone. He can't feel anything. The surgery is performed with the utmost respect and care. Your son will be treated with dignity," Keith assured her. "What happens after?" Mr. Torres questioned. "After the donation. Mateo's body will be returned to you. You can have a funeral, a burial, whatever you wish. The donation won't change that," Keith explained. He leaned forward. "I can't make this decision for you. No one can. But I can tell you that organ donation is a gift. It's a way for Mateo's life to continue in others. It's a way for something good to come from this tragedy." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Mrs. Torres looked at her husband. "He'd want this." "I know," Mr. Torres agreed. "Then we should do it." "We should honor his wish," Mrs. Torres decided. Keith walked them through the paperwork, explaining each step, answering every question. By the time they were done, it was noon. Keith coordinated with the surgical team, contacted the recipients, arranged the logistics. Mateo Torres would save 3 lives today. A heart, 2 kidneys, 3 people who would wake up tomorrow with a chance they didn't have today. Keith found Oliver in the staff lounge, drinking terrible hospital coffee. "It's done. Surgery's in 2 hours. "Thank you for coming in." "I know it's Christmas," Oliver replied. "It's okay," Keith assured him. He poured himself a cup of coffee. "Actually, I'm glad you called. I needed this." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Needed what?" "A reminder of how depressing this job is." "A reminder of why it matters," Keith corrected. They stood at the window, looking out at the snow-covered parking lot. The sky was clear today, bright blue and crisp. "Something changed," Oliver observed. "A lot changed," Keith confirmed. He told Oliver about Skylar's visit, about Kim's video, about the memorial at Emma's parents' house. I'd forgotten what it felt like to see the impact of this work. I'd convinced myself it was futile, that we couldn't save everyone, so why bother trying? But that's not the point, is it? The point is to save the ones we can. "Welcome back," Oliver declared. "I'm not sure I'm all the way back yet," Keith admitted. "That's okay." "Baby steps," Oliver encouraged. After the surgery was successfully completed, Keith left the hospital. It was 3 p.m. and he was supposed to meet Skylar at 4. He went home, showered, changed into clean clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw someone different from the man who'd stood here yesterday morning. Skylar had suggested a coffee shop on Main Street, a local place with good pastries and strong espresso. Keith got there first and snagged a table by the window. Outside, families walked past with shopping bags and sleds. Kids threw snowballs. The world was alive and joyful. Skylar arrived right on time, cheeks pink from the cold. She wore a green sweater and jeans, her auburn hair down around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw Keith, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Hey," Skylar greeted, sitting down. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas. Do you want anything?" "My treat," Keith offered. "Peppermint mocha, please," Skylar requested. Keith ordered their drinks and returned to the table. They sat, watching people outside. "I got called in this morning," Keith revealed. "A new donor. 26-year-old guy, car accident. I talked to his parents about donation." "That must have been hard." "On Christmas," Skylar sympathized. "It was. But it was also necessary. He's going to save 3 lives, Keith explained. He looked at Skylar. "I wouldn't have been able to do that a week ago. I would have gone through the motions, said the right words, but I wouldn't have really been there. Today, I was there. I saw those parents' grief, and I honored it. I helped them make a choice that mattered." "What changed?" Skylar asked. "You, Emma, Kim?" "Everyone I've met in the past 24 hours, Keith answered. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "I'd built these walls to protect myself from caring too much. I thought if I stayed detached, it wouldn't hurt so much when things went wrong. But I was wrong. Detachment didn't protect me. It just made me hollow." Skylar reached across the table and took his hand. Her touch was warm, steady. "It takes courage to let yourself feel, especially in a job like yours." "I'm not sure it's courage. It might just be exhaustion. I'm tired of being numb," Keith confessed. "Then stop being numb. Let yourself feel everything. The joy, the grief, the hope, the heartbreak. All of it," Skylar encouraged. They talked for hours. Skylar told him about her life before the transplant, about the fear and the waiting and the certainty that she was going to die. She told him about waking up after surgery, feeling Emma's heart beat in her chest, realizing she'd been given a second chance. "I promised myself I wouldn't waste it," Skylar revealed. "I'd live big. I'd take chances. I'd say yes to things I would have said no to before. That's why I ran that 5K. That's why I went back to school. That's why I'm sitting here with you now." "What do you mean?" Keith questioned. "I like you, Keith. I have since I saw you in that hospital hallway, looking lost and tired and so determined to not feel anything. I wanted to shake you. I wanted to remind you that life is precious and short and worth living fully," Skylar admitted. Keith's heart beat faster. "I like you too. I have since you ambushed me with that photo album." Skylar laughed. "I'm not sorry for ambushing you." "Good. Don't be," Keith replied. The coffee shop started to close, the barista wiping down tables and dimming lights. Keith and Skylar walked outside into the cold. The sun was setting, painting the sky purple and pink. "Do you want to walk?" Skylar suggested. "Sure," Keith agreed. They walked through downtown Evergreen Falls, past shops with dark windows and houses with lights blazing. They talked about everything and nothing. Music, movies, childhood memories, dreams for the future. Keith learned that Skylar taught art at the elementary school, that she loved jazz and Korean food and old books with marginalia. She learned that he'd wanted to be a doctor before Luna died, that he played guitar badly, that he was afraid of heights but loved to swim. They ended up at the park, standing under trees heavy with snow. The playground was empty, the swings moving slightly in the wind. "I need to tell you something," Keith announced. "Okay," Skylar responded. "I've been alone for a long time. Since my brother died, I've kept people at arm's length. I told myself it was easier that way, safer. But I've been miserable. And meeting you, seeing your life, understanding what Emma's gift meant to you, it made me realize I've been wasting time. I've been so afraid of losing people that I've forgotten how to let them in," Keith confessed. Skylar stepped closer. "And now? Now I want to try. I want to let you in, if you're willing to put up with someone who's still figuring out how to feel things again," Keith ventured. "I think you're doing pretty well so far," Skylar assured him. Keith kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. It just happened, as natural as breathing. Skylar kissed him back, her hands coming up to cup his face, and Keith felt Emma's heart beating in her chest, strong and steady. When they pulled apart, Skylar was smiling. That was nice. Yeah, it was, Keith agreed. Want to do it again? Skylar asked. Absolutely, Keith confirmed. They kissed again, longer this time, and Keith thought about miracles and second chances and the infinite ripple effects of one person's choice. Part 4. The Future. The next morning, December 26th, Keith went back to work. He walked into his office with coffee from the good shop downtown and actually looked at the photos on his desk, the ones he'd stopped seeing years before. His niece and nephew at the beach, Nova and Beau at their wedding, Luna, young and healthy, laughing at the camera. He opened his email and started responding to messages he'd been ignoring. Donor families wanting updates, recipients asking questions, colleagues checking in. He was in the middle of drafting a response when someone knocked on his door. "Come in," Keith called. A young man entered, maybe 30, with dark hair and nervous energy. He held a folder. "Are you Keith Hollister?" "I am. How can I help you?" Keith responded. "I'm Maverick's older brother. From Emma's memorial. I didn't get a chance to talk to you the other night, but I wanted to come by and say thank you. You coordinated my brother's kidney transplant," the man explained. Keith stood and shook the man's hand. "How's Maverick doing?" "Amazing. He's like a different person. He has energy now. He's trying out for the basketball team next month. He's talking about college," the brother reported. His eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was going to lose him. He was so sick, and we couldn't find a donor. Then Emma's kidney became available, and it was a perfect match. You made that happen." "I just did the coordination," Keith deflected. "You did more than that. You gave my family hope. You gave my brother a future," the brother insisted. He held out the folder. "I wanted to give you this." Inside was a drawing. Maverick had sketched a heart with wings, intricate and detailed. Inside the heart, he'd written the names of all 8 of Emma's recipients. Below, in careful print, one gift. 8 miracles. Thank you, Keith Hollister, for making miracles possible. Keith's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes, not embarrassed anymore by the tears. "Thank you for this. I'll treasure it." After Maverick's brother left, Keith pinned the drawing to his wall. He looked at it for a long moment, then returned to his work with renewed purpose. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Keith coordinated transplants, talked to families, made matches, but now he did it with presence. He saw the people behind the paperwork. He honored their stories. He remembered why this work mattered. He and Skylar saw each other almost every day. Coffee dates became dinner dates, became weekends together. Keith met her family, her friends, her students. Skylar came to Nova's house for New Year's Eve and won over the kids by teaching them how to paint with watercolors. In February, Skylar took Keith to meet Emma's parents. They welcomed him with open arms, showing him more photos, telling more stories. Jaden gave him one of Emma's journals, pressed it into his hands with a smile. She wrote about organ donation in here, Jaden revealed, about why it mattered to her. "I think you should read it." That night, Keith opened the journal. Emma's handwriting was neat and looping, the words of someone who chose them carefully. "I've always believed that we're here to help each other," Emma had written, "that our lives have meaning in how we touch other lives. I don't know what happens after we die. I don't know if there's heaven or reincarnation or just nothing. But I know that if something happens to me, if I die before I'm ready, I want my death to matter. I want it to help someone. I want pieces of me to keep living, keep helping, keep making the world better. That's my legacy, that's my gift." Keith read the entry 3 times, memorizing the words. Then he called Skylar. "Hey," Skylar answered. "What's up?" "I love you," Keith declared. A pause, then soft and warm. "I love you too." They said it again and again, testing out the words, making them real. In March, Oliver called Keith into his office. "I have a proposition for you." "Should I be worried?" Keith asked. "I want you to start a program, a support group for transplant recipients and donor families, a place where they can share their stories, connect with each other, process what they've been through. You'd coordinate it, facilitate the meetings. What do you think?" Oliver proposed. "I think that's a great idea," Keith responded. "Good. Because I already told administration you'd do it," Oliver admitted. The first meeting was small, just 6 people in a conference room with coffee and cookies, but they talked for 2 hours, sharing grief and gratitude in equal measure. By the third meeting, they had 15 people. By the 6th, they had to move to a bigger room. Skylar came to some meetings, telling her story, answering questions. Kim came and showed his video. Maverick came and talked about what it meant to be healthy after years of illness. Keith watched them all, amazed by their resilience, their courage, their capacity for hope in the face of loss. In June, Keith took Skylar to the coast for a long weekend. They walked on the beach, collecting sea glass the way Emma used to. They talked about the future, about possibilities, about what they wanted from life. On the last night, sitting on the sand watching the sunset, Keith pulled out a small box. "I know it's fast," Keith began. "I know we've only known each other 6 months. But I've spent too much of my life waiting, being afraid, holding back. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to live fully. I want to love completely. I want to spend my life with you." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, a silver band with a small diamond. "Will you marry me?" Keith asked. Skylar laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed on the beach as the sun set, Emma's heart beating steady and strong in Skylar's chest, and Keith thought about Luna and Emma and all the people whose lives touched his and changed him and made him better. He thought about the gift of life, of love, of second chances. He thought about how one person's choice can ripple out forever, touching lives in ways they'll never see. And he was grateful, so incredibly, wonderfully grateful. Epilogue, December 24th, 1 year later. Keith and Skylar hosted Christmas Eve at their new house, a small place on the edge of town with room for a real Christmas tree and furniture that actually matched. The place smelled like pine and cinnamon, like home. Nova came with Bo and the kids. Oliver came with Noah. Emma's parents came bringing Kim and Maverick and the other recipients. The house filled with laughter and conversation and the chaotic joy of people who loved each other. They ate too much food and told too many stories. The kids ran around hyped up on cookies. Someone put on Christmas music. Someone else started a snowball fight in the backyard. As the evening wound down, people gathered in the living room. Keith stood by the fireplace, Skylar at his side. He looked around at all these faces, all these lives intertwined by one woman's choice. "I want to say something," Keith announced. The room quieted. "A year ago, I was lost. I'd forgotten why my work mattered. I'd forgotten how to feel, how to connect, how to love. I'd built walls to protect myself, but those walls just made me hollow," Keith confessed. He took Skylar's hand. "Then I met Skylar. And through her, I met all of you. You reminded me that every transplant is a miracle. Every donor is a hero. Every life saved is worth celebrating." He looked at Emma's parents. Emma's gift didn't just save 8 lives. It saved mine too. It brought me back to myself. It gave me a future I didn't think I could have. So thank you. Thank you for raising a daughter who believed in helping others. Thank you for honoring her wish. Thank you for letting me be part of this family. Jaden was crying. So was Kim. So was Keith, but he didn't try to hide it anymore. "To Emma," someone proposed, raising a glass. "To Emma," everyone echoed. They drank and hugged and kept celebrating, Later, after everyone had gone home, Keith and Skylar sat on the couch, exhausted and happy. "That was perfect," Skylar observed, her head on Keith's shoulder. "It was," Keith agreed. "Emma would have loved it," Skylar remarked. "Yeah, she would have," Keith confirmed. They watched the lights on the Christmas tree blink. Keith felt Emma's heart beating in Skylar's chest, steady and sure, and he thought about how death and life were intertwined, how grief and joy could coexist, how one person's ending could be another person's beginning. He thought about Luna, gone for so many years but never forgotten. He thought about the work he did every day, coordinating transplants, honoring donors, helping families navigate impossible choices. He thought about the gift of life and how it came in so many forms. "I'm glad you ambushed me," Keith remarked. Skylar laughed. "I'm glad you let me." "I'm glad Emma chose to be a donor," Keith added. "Me too," Skylar agreed. Keith kissed his wife, grateful for every moment, every heartbeat, every second chance. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. Tomorrow would be Christmas, and they would celebrate. They would remember those they'd lost and honor those they'd found. They would live fully and love completely. They would carry Emma's gift forward, rippling out into infinite tomorrows, and that, Keith thought, was the greatest miracle of all. The end.